All right, well, welcome to our Coastal Caucus lunch. We normally do this, obviously, in person with our friends at NOAA. They are our great partners in the Coastal Caucus and have been for many years. I usually count how many Coastal Caucus programs we've had, and I think we're into the 20s at this point. So we're really pleased to, again, come together to talk about some of the issues that states are facing in their coastal communities and to learn from our friends at NOAA and friends as part of the Digital Coast Partnership. And so I will just turn it over to Susan Fox from NOAA's Office of Coastal Management, who is joining us virtually from Charleston, South Carolina, I believe. Susan, over to you.
Thanks, Molly, and hi, everyone. It's really great to be back with you all, even if some of us have to be virtual. And so I'm guessing I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Everybody can hear me okay. Awesome. So for those of us who, if those of us haven't met me, I'm with Linker at NOAA's Office for Coastal Management. And just like Molly said, I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, and we've been partners with NSGIC for years. I believe the first Coastal Caucus was in Madison in 2007, and Mickey is showing off the t-shirt from that conference right now. So then maybe that's, I don't know how many that is, 20 something caucuses at this point. Great, I'm glad. Thank you, Jamie. You guys can hear me fine. So we're excited about our agenda for today's Coastal Caucus session, and we appreciate all of your interest in participating. We're going to begin with a series of quick updates from my office, the Office for Coastal Management. Mickey Schmidt will summarize what's been happening with the Digital Coast Act since it has passed, and then I'm going to provide a summary of the recent Digital Coast Partnership discussion with the NOAA Science Advisory Board, during which NSGIC participated. And then Margaret Allen, NOAA's OCM's Fellowship Coordinator, she's joining us today and will give us an update on the Digital Coast Fellowship opportunity. And then following these short updates, we'll then have a panel on equity activities to hear about efforts underway in NSGIC, NOAA OCM, and the National Estuarine Research Reserves. As always, we have a full agenda, and if you have any questions for any of the speakers, please drop them in the chat. If you are attending virtually, for those in the room, if you're not also logged in, then you can't use the chat as well, so you can maybe pass your questions over to Leland or Tim, and they can share them with us at the end of the session, and as time allows, we'll be able to address some of these questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mickey for a quick update on the Digital Coast Act. Can't hear you, Mickey.
How about now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Susan, and thank you, Molly, and thank all of NSGIC for supporting the Coastal Caucus as we first proposed it back in 2007 in Madison, and it's been going strong ever since. So really appreciate the opportunity once again to meet with you all. It's been a while, so just echo Susan and saying it's great to be with you guys again. For those that I haven't met, my name's Mickey Schmidt, and I work for NOAA's Office for Coastal Management. I'm also based out of our Charleston office, or in my furnished room over the garage for the past 18 months since Albuquerque. Really want to thank NSGIC for the longstanding partnership and advocacy efforts that finally pushed the Digital Coast Act over the finish line. It was back in 2007 when we introduced the concept of Digital Coast at the first caucus. Right after that, we formed the Digital Coast Partnership, and NSGIC was one of the founding members of our partnership group, and has been the strongest advocate ever since to get the Digital Coast over the act over the finish line. For those that remember, the act was first introduced in 2010. 10 years later, it was signed into law this past December. So really appreciate all the support that NSGIC has offered. So since that act passed, the first 4 or 5 months of the year was pretty hectic. We were able to provide and were asked to provide several informational briefings on the Hill. We were also able to thank all the sponsors of the act and address their questions. And their primary question was, well, what else can we do for you? And it was very opportunistic. We've been really pushing what's called out in the act for filling data gaps. And so we had a lot of interest in how we would fill those data gaps, and then also how we would work through our partners to achieve filling the requirements in the act. So through the partnership, we've developed a new strategic plan, and we're following that as we speak right now. We also participated in several podcasts and did several interviews since the act was passed. So moving on, we hope that the president's budget is passed, but there are resources in that budget proposal that would enable us to further the requirements in the act and address the strategic plan. So hopefully at the mid-year meeting, we'll be able to discuss these, and we look forward to meeting with you then. So I'll close there and pass it back to Susan.
Thanks, Nikki. And if anyone has questions about any of that, as we noted before, if you could just drop your questions in the chat or hand them to Leland or Tim if you're in person. So now I'm going to give a quick overview of the NOAA Science Advisory Board meeting. In July, the Digital Coast Partnership was given the opportunity to discuss coastal community resilience with the NOAA Advisory Science Board. And for background, the advisory board was established in 1997, and it assists NOAA in maintaining a complete and accurate understanding of scientific issues critical to the agency's missions. So one point I like to make is NOAA's new administrator, Dr. Rick Spinrad, will work very closely with the advisory board to set research priorities for the agency on the topic of coastal resilience. So the Digital Coast Partnership organizations were asked to share any ideas around what might be needed as far as information, resources, and data for right now and as far out as 10 years from now. It was a great opportunity for the partnership, and the input was well received. And I would like to sincerely thank Kim Jackson, Mark Higuchi, and Jamie Chesser for attending and providing input. Lisa Aurmuller from NERA, National Ocean Research Reserves Association, who is in attendance with us today, also participated in this meeting, and I want to thank you too, Lisa. And we'll soon have a report from the advisory board that we can share with all of you that summarizes NOAA's research efforts for resilience. The board asked the group 7 questions, but I'll only have time to highlight 2 of them today and some of the feedback that was provided. So the first question was, what is the most important long-term challenge to coastal resilience that NOAA should assist with? So several partners said the biggest challenge is the social science aspect of coastal resilience. So for example, we need to help decision makers and the public understand that becoming more resilient is a positive versus talking about the negative. And therefore, what's needed is for NOAA to translate the science to something that sticks in a positive way. Mark offered that capacity building at a local level is what is really needed, as well as a need for increased collaboration across local, state, and federal agencies. And Kim offered that we all share a challenge of successfully influencing public will to invest in things like data collection, and that NOAA should help promote successes of efforts like statewide LiDAR collection, for instance, in Florida, and capture the benefits of the data and helping communities become more resilient. And the second question I wanted to highlight was, how might emerging and future technologies, for example, AI, machine learning, innovation in satellite observations, autonomous platforms, be used to further coastal resilience? And you'll see that Jamie's also adding these to the chat because they're kind of hard to go along with. So Mark offered that coastal states have expressed the need for carbon budget maps based on land cover, hydrography, and wetlands, et cetera, and offered that machine learning should be used to enhance tools for decision making. And Jeff Stone from the Association of State Floodplain Managers, which many of you, I believe, know Jeff now, he talked about the amount of oblique imagery that many have collected and how it offers a big issue in long-term and stable storage and dissemination. And one example is in the Great Lakes. Wisconsin has 100,000 photos over 7 time periods. The photos are used by a wide range of organizations, including the Department of Natural Resources for permitting. The Corps of Engineers flew high-res obliques in 2012 for coastal flood studies. The photos have been offline for over a year and people are still requesting them. And now they're almost 10 years old. The Wisconsin Coastal Management Program is flying obliques every year by using the Civil Air Patrol. Several Great Lakes states have an interest and offered that NOAA has an opportunity to lead in this area and help coordinate oblique collection, storage, and use. And so, sorry, that was kind of a quick rundown, but just wanted to give you a kind of a little taste of what kind of was discussed on the Science Advisory Board call, and we can provide more details around that later. So we appreciate NSGIC's participation and interest in that call. That was very well received. So now I'm going to turn it over to Margaret Allen, who's going to talk about the Digital Coast Fellowship opportunity. Margaret?
Thanks, Susan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I'm actually going to share a presentation. So I'm going to attempt the screen sharing. And let me pull up the presentation. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, thanks so much, Susan. So like Susan mentioned, I'm Margaret Allen. I also work here in Charleston with Linker at the Office for Coastal Management. And one of my main roles is coordinating some of our fellowship programs. So I wanted to take a chance today to tell you guys a little bit about our Digital Coast Fellowship Program. So this is a program that's open to all of our 8 Digital Coast partners, including NSGIC. And I'll give you a little history about how NSGIC's participated in the program and how you can possibly participate. So the fellowship program has really a twofold mission of providing a professional development experience to new professionals just completing their graduate or doctoral work, and provides technical assistance in the form of a fellow to our DigCoast partners. It's funded and coordinated by the Office for Coastal Management. And a little history of the program. The first class was placed in 2012. 2022 will be our 5th class of Digital Coast Fellows, and 12 fellows in total have been placed in this program. This program is run in conjunction with the Coastal Management Fellowship Program, which is for our coastal states and territories. And I know a couple of you have been involved. I saw Jim comment earlier from Wisconsin. He's been involved in one of those Coastal Management Fellowship projects and acted as a mentor for a fellow there. So NSGIC has hosted 2 fellows in the past with the Digital Coast Fellowship Program, one in the inaugural year in 2012 in partnership with NACO, and then a fellow in 2016. And I'll tell you a little bit more about his work. I think many of you may have met him if you were around during 2016 and 2018. His name was Rich Bizard. He was placed in Alaska, and he helped develop storm histories, an online tool for visualizing flood risks, and maps that rate the severity of local flood risk zones. He was working to help specifically to remote Alaskan communities better prepare for and respond to coastal storms. So people are actually using a lot of his products. Many of his maps are being used to communicate flood risks in a way that's easy to understand. And his publication is helping estimate the heights of local coastal flooding for risk analysis. We also were able to keep him in the family, so to speak. He was hired on by his fellowship host, and is still working on some of the same work he had been working on, and actually received a National Coastal Resilience Fund grant for over $1 million to continue to map flood risks and identify data gaps for 44 additional Alaska Native communities. So how, if you want to get involved, what is required of a host? So the host developed 2-year projects for their fellow and submit proposals to us here at NOAA. There is a match, a $15,000 match, so $7,500 per year. We ask that the host designate a mentor because the mentoring and professional development aspects are really something we focus on. So we want a fellow to get actual on-the-job experience, but we also want to give them some more career development and professional development help. So when I say professional development opportunities and on-the-job training that we ask the host to provide, NOAA also provides a lot of those for the fellows, but we want someone to, and most folks in your office, to help the fellow identify opportunities and be introduced to folks they can network with and provide an overall sort of professional development experience for them. We asked the host to travel to Charleston to do the interviews for the selection. We help ask the site, the host site, to host the fellow for a site visit, and we'll pay for the fellow to get there. We ask that the host pay for their expenses while they're there. We have a couple fellowship trainings that we offer the fellows and mentors in conjunction, including a mentoring training and a project management planning kind of training where we focus specifically on the fellows project, so you guys can kind of get on the same page with the project and start developing some of the timelines and logic models and that sort of thing. And we ask that the host require any project-related travel costs. So what are the benefits to you for hosting a fellow? You get an energetic professional right out of graduate school, ready to work with you for 2 years on a project. You will get a completed project and some things to work with at the end of the fellow's 2 years with you. The satisfaction of having the opportunity to provide mentoring and guidance to a new young professional and help build that coastal management workforce out there. So here's the timeline for this year. Proposals are due right around the corner on October 15th. I know Jamie has shared a lot of information with you guys about what would need to be included in a proposal and some of the other guidance documents for developing a proposal. November 30th, we'll have projects selected. By mid-March, we'll have finalists selected and share those finalist applications with the hosts. And then in late April, we match fellows with hosts, and August 1st is the start date. So just a few things I wanted to highlight, especially given the conversation we're going to have later on here this afternoon. We have been really looking at our program to figure out how we can better incorporate diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice principles. And so some of the things we've done lately is we actually developed a fellowship DEIJ value statement, and I just wanted to take a second to read that. Our office is committed to making coastal fellowships accessible to all interested and eligible candidates, allowing all fellows to be comfortable in their identities and participate fully in their fellowships, and removing barriers to becoming the next generation of coastal leaders. So we thought that was really important. We have a few other fellowship programs here at OCM, and that's sort of our overarching fellowship goal statement, value statement. So another thing we had is incorporated this year is that proposals must describe how the project will advance diversity, equity, inclusion, and or justice. And so we suggested that hosts could look at all different areas of the project, including who they're partnering with, how they're doing their needs assessment, what some of their stakeholders are, the outreach they're doing, the scope of the project, the targeted communities, and or some of the outcomes that are developed. We have a $15,000 host match. It used to have to come from non-federal funds, and it does not any longer have to. And we thought that was going to remove some of the barriers to maybe some of our hosts being able to identify matching funds. We are working to minimize implicit bias in the candidate reviews by ensuring a diverse review panel and some revised guidance for those reviewers. We are incorporating some DEIJ experiences and trainings for fellows. We've had a lot of guest speakers from a variety of backgrounds. And we're developing some relationship with minority serving institutions to attract more minority students and increase diversity in the program. So hopefully those will be a little bit of food for thought as we move into the next section. And that's it that I have for you today. This is my email address and the website for the fellowship, which I think, as I said, I think Jamie shared a lot of that with you, but feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about proposals, how to apply, what to include, or just want to run ideas by me. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. That was a great overview. I really appreciate you sharing that and including DEIJ stuff.
Sure.
And so, as Margaret mentioned, Jamie shared a lot of the details around the fellowship through the Coastal Caucus listserv. But yeah, Margaret, directly contact Margaret if you have any questions, or share them with Tim or Leland right now, and then they can type them in the chat for you. I know you guys get it. So, all right, so we're gonna move on and dive into the equity panel. So we're here, we're really happy to be here to be able to convene this panel today and share what organizations are doing in the equity space. So I'm gonna ask all the panelists to introduce themselves. I'm gonna start. So again, I'm Susan Fox and I'm with NOAA's Office for Coastal Management. So I sit in Charleston, South Carolina, and I'm a project manager and training specialist. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Lisa.
Okay, thank you for having me. My name is Lisa Auermuller. I am the past president of the National Estuarine Research Reserve Association, and I am also the assistant manager at the Jacques Cousteau National Estuarine Research Reserve. And I am sitting in southern Ocean County, New Jersey, in a small town called Little Egg Harbor.
Thank you, Lisa. So I know Leland and Tim, everybody knows you, but maybe there's two that don't. So if you guys want to introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon, Leland Pierce, state of New Mexico. And pertinent to this discussion, one of the co-chairs of our Member Resources Committee where these issues have been initially discussed.
Good afternoon, everybody. Tim Johnson, state of North Carolina. I'm the director of the State Center for Geographic Information and Analysis and the state rep from North Carolina to NSGIC, and also a co-chair of the Member Resources Working Group.
Thank you. Thank you guys for doing that. And I guess now really turning it over to y'all to share NSGIC's thoughts on equity in the equity space. You can jumpstart this.
Oh, we got it. Okay. NSGIC is just getting started, frankly. Our executive director, Molly, she brought the issue up and it has been discussed initially in Member Resources Working Group. Somebody that's near and dear to the Coastal Caucus, Jamie Chesser, has been working diligently gathering information for us so we can properly educate ourselves. And we've held an initial meeting, initial discussion with the representatives that were here in attendance in Addison. More discussion needs to be had, but we do recognize that not only do we want to look internally and externally at what we do, but there's a lot of opportunities for NSGIC to really be a positive influence on these matters. So we're getting started. We don't have any specific details just yet, but please bear with us. We are moving fast.
I'll just add that, you know, one of the challenges we have is to learn more about what the states are doing within their states with respect to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So we're looking to identify projects and opportunities in those states I know in North Carolina where we have an activity related to environmental justice that we can bring to the table for the rest of the membership to benefit from. And we also, NSGIC, as a matter of fact, had some awards last year to King County in Washington for their work in equity issues. We've had discussions with ESRI about racial equity. So we're getting, like Leland said, we're getting our resources identified so we can begin to take some direction on how to address it within the organization and be able to communicate that to the states and learn from the states.
Thanks, John. I appreciate you sharing, and that's great. A lot of us are in, we've heard from a lot of folks that they're just beginning these conversations, and within NOAA, diversity and inclusion has been a focus for several years, and so in an attempt to increase the diversity of the workforce. And if you're interested in learning more, please let me know, or see NOAA's homepage for the links to our strategic plan and other diversity inclusion resources. But today specifically, I wanted to quickly highlight 2 Office for Coastal Management equity activities that we've recently done. So we're in the beginning of digging deep, and these are relevant to the interests of the Coastal Caucus. Both support the President's priorities. So first is in support of Executive Order 13985, advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. So the Office of Coastal Management, it was selected one of 3 NOAA pilots to perform a service equity assessment, focused on one of our most popular tools. Many of you know the Sea Level Rise Viewer. This tool really helps coastal communities understand their vulnerability to sea level rise and coastal flooding. It helps them prioritize efforts and make their community safer and more resilient. And the assessment was designed to identify successes, challenges, and opportunities in reaching the underserved. It began with a lengthy survey from OMB, very lengthy, that we can share with you guys if you want to see the questions to that, that led us to findings and recommendations that are being incorporated into an action plan to improve access and use by underserved communities. The primary findings from the assessment that we did, well, there's insufficient data regarding if and how underserved communities use the Sea Level Rise Viewer, and that wasn't a surprise to us because, NOAA is a federal agency, and so we're limited in what we can ask our users for. So we can't ask for their addresses or other private information. We rely on Google Analytics to assess our user base, and there are limitations on what data we can gather. The second finding around that is that there are also some high resolution LiDAR data gaps, as many of you are aware of, in places like Alaska that the Sea Level Rise Viewer does not support. We need to characterize the most vulnerable populations and identify best practices for ensuring equitable service delivery. And lastly, we need to intentionally and systematically work with networks and partners to ensure underserved audiences are benefiting from the data and information that we provide through the Digital Coast. And we plan to work with the Digital Coast Partnership to begin doing this. So NSGIC will be included in this. And the second item I wanted to mention is that there may be funding in FY22 to address some of these assessment findings. The President's budget proposal includes funding the Office for Coastal Management to lead a national ocean service effort to increase equity for our products and services. We'll be coordinating this through the Digital Coast Partnership organizations, through panels like this one, and to understand equity efforts and requirements, and more of that will be coming pending the FY22 budget from Congress. So we just wanted to share these different pieces of kind of where we're at, and if you are interested in the survey questions that we went through to address the assessment, we're happy to share those later as well. And that's all I have time for. So now I'm going to hand it over to Lisa from NERA.
Okay, thank you so much, Susan. I'm going to start by saying that NERA also doesn't think that we have all the right answers here. And we're doing everything we can in this space, kind of leading with heart first and really trying to understand. For those of you that aren't as familiar with NERA, we're the National Estuarine Research Reserve Association. So we're the national level friends group for the 29 research reserves around the country who are federally managed by NOAA, but then are managed locally by a state organization or a nonprofit. So we have the benefit of having the national NOAA partnership, but are very, very locally relevant and seated within the needs of the local communities. NERA has been approaching the DEIJ topic again through very much a listening, learning, and leaning in approach. When a lot of the discussions around racial inequities first started 1.5 years ago, our immediate reaction was to put out a statement, and we actually paused and really thought about it and figured there's so much more we need to learn within this topic before we could even pretend to suggest what we were going to do about it. And it's really been that slow and steady approach, which has sort of led us in our approach with DEIJ. We very much have been working in partnership with NOAA as our federal partner on making sure that our friends groups and our local reserve staff are in lockstep with NOAA in terms of the approach we are taking. We've established a work group for DEIJ, which is made up of 31 different staff members from around the country, as well as local friends group members from individual reserves. They are committed to meeting monthly for 1.5 hours, and half of that meeting time is spent just learning and listening, and the other half is spent really trying to determine actionable steps for the best path forward. We also have co-chairs in that effort. So one co-chair comes from the NERA, the National Friends Association, and the other co-chair comes from NOAA, the federal agency. And they meet every other week to talk about the best path forward. Again, all coming from a place of learning, understanding innate biases, acknowledging what we don't know, and figuring out where to take the topic. The past 10 months have been doing things like defining even what the words D, E, I, and J mean in the context of the work that the reserve system does. And anyone that has worked with the reserve system knows we're very strategic and thoughtful about the way we do things. So draft definitions of those words have been raised, and they're out for comment by our entire NEARS family at the local level. And then really thinking about process and how we move this forward so it becomes a cultural shift within our organization. So really trying to underpin the work we do by setting up the right conditions for success moving forward. And Susan, if we have time later, I can talk more about that. But I think for now, I'll just leave it at we are taking it slow.
And we actually have time right now, Lisa, if you want to, before we dive into questions, you can share some of that. We're running early, so.
Okay, I'd be happy to. I think very similar to what you heard from Margaret, the NEARS has a fellowship as well. It's called the Margaret A. Davidson Fellowship. And we've been very committed to making sure that fellowship is equitable and diverse, not only in its recruiting, but the way in which, as Margaret was saying, we break down some of the barriers there are to even applying for things like these fellowships. Things you don't even think about, like getting on grants.gov could even be a barrier for some of the smaller universities that are looking to advance their fellows. So something like that is just, it maybe seems like a small step, but it actually makes a really big difference. Additionally, our DEIJ work group has been working with the newer reserves that are becoming part of the system and ensuring that their management plans have a DEIJ focus, and they have specific actions called out within them to ensure that those reserves are starting out on a footing that's considering diversity and inclusion from the beginning. NERA itself, which is made up of a board, we actually, we took this so seriously, we added an ex officio member to our board to be our co-chair to lead on these efforts for us. And we've also written DEIJ actions into our strategic plan, again, to really solidify that foundation that this is the approach we want to take moving forward. Our work group, which I mentioned earlier, has a bunch of different subcommittees. We have a communication subcommittee that's looking at our internal and external communications, ensuring that when folks log on to NERA's website, they see themselves reflected in the photos and in the stories that we're sharing, and they feel like they're part of the work we're doing. There's a whole learning team as part of the work group. So really trying to understand what the learning needs are in the system and figure out what it is we don't know so we can figure out how to learn it. And then we've even created an Indigenous knowledge and resource management advisory group within the work group. A number of our reserves sit on sites with an Indigenous population, and they are co-partners in the management of the reserve site. So really understanding their perspectives and the challenges they face in terms of resource management from their long history of working on the land is something that's been really important. So that's a few concrete examples.
Really appreciate you sharing that. It's really interesting to hear kind of the depth of how y'all are addressing this and considering these different, it really is, you have to be really thoughtful. So I love that you're leading with the heart, you know, because it's really important. So I feel like for the question part of the session, I was going to start with you, Lisa, if you don't mind. And around that first question that we considered, you know, you kind of talked about this a little bit, but if you could talk a little bit more about some constraints. So as you've worked with the different working groups, what are some specific, if you hadn't highlighted them already, just constraints that you've identified or seen?
Sure. I think one of our recognized constraints right away was that we wanted to jump into action immediately and put out a statement on behalf of the association, like many other for-profit and non-profit organizations did, saying, you know, this is an important topic. We're dedicated to doing X, Y, and Z. And we quickly recognized that we were not in the right place to even start listing actions that we felt we could move forward on because we just didn't even know enough. What I can say in terms of turning that constraint around to an action is we have realized that there are DGIJ initiatives happening in the reserve system already, and trying to get an assessment or a catalog of what those approaches are, what lessons have been learned, and making sure they're transferable to other reserves is an approach we're taking to overcome that sort of initial barrier we recognized. So that's one of them. Another one is just that there isn't a ton of diversity within our organization currently. And so when you sit at a conference around a table and you look around, you don't see a lot of diversity, and that is something that starts, you know, at the early STEM learning pathway for a variety of high schools and then colleges, grad schools. And so just recognizing that we, again, have a lot to learn, and we have a lot to assess where we are all at and how lucky we are to be there, and how to help others see themselves be in that same place.
Thank you. Thank you for that thoughtful response, Lisa. And I guess, you know, Tim and Leland, considering y'all's conversation, like what you provided, NSGIC being kind of in the beginning and the thoughts around DIJ and equity, do you have any thoughts around, have you considered any constraints, identified any constraints right now has your organization thought about that, picked up on that?
Well, one of the concrete things we've done in the past couple of 3 years is create the Geo Women activity to bring women more in leadership positions in NSGIC and be mentors to each other, and kind of get the pipeline flowing, as you can tell already in the leadership of NSGIC. to better engage women. I think one of the overall things, the GIS profession is not particularly diverse just as a whole. I've been in it a long time, and that's one of the things that's lacking, and just we have to do a better job of communicating about the profession, and in our case, the state government side of that profession.
Thank you, Tim. And so, coming from NOAA's perspective, thinking about the same question, I think I addressed some of the beginning parts of this question around what is your organization doing to address the needs of the underserved, but the constraints. So really, I'll take this opportunity to offer another constraint that we've discussed, and that is our thoughts and approach to connect to those boundary organizations and to gain a more clear understanding of the needs and improve delivery mechanisms. The constraint we see that we have is that we don't have a contract or grant vehicles in place to reach some of these organizations, and we're looking at how to accomplish this. So now looking to you, Lisa, again for the second question, and it seems like you've already touched on external organizations, and if you're working to learn about the needs of the underserved that you're working with. And I mean, you've kind of addressed some of that in your talking points, I believe, correct? Yeah.
I'm happy to point out some specific organizations that we've really looked to as exemplars of a learning approach that we're trying to take. So Restore America's Estuaries, again, a very coastal focused group, we really think has been a great leader to look towards in terms of the approach they're taking on this topic, as well as the Sea Grant program has done quite a bit of work, and we view them as a leader in this organization. And then since we are a national level group, we can look even regionally, and groups like the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, we feel have also really had some proven leadership around putting this into their strategic plan back in 2014, which was long before this became a super popular topic to talk about, and is really now trying to look to figure out the best ways to move forward on some of their approaches and their action. So those are some of the groups we feel are leaders on this topic. And again, we feel like we have a lot to learn from them.
Great, thank you for expanding on that and mentioning a few of those. And then I guess putting, back to NSGIC, Tim and Leland, if y'all even at the state level have reached out to any external organizations.
Yeah, we sure have. In particular, we've had discussions with our partners at ESRI. They have an extensive effort towards DEIJ work, and we have been, as we've noted before, we're trying to gather as much information as we can, and they've been invaluable on this. And then also of interest, a gentleman named Greg Babinski, who is the GIS Marketing and Business Development Manager for King County, Washington, has an introduction to GIS for Equity and Social Justice workshop. And Jamie Chesser actually attended that and provided information from that, and it has given us a lot of ideas moving forward how we'd like to proceed. So we are in the process of reaching out to more. I know our executive director, Molly, is very committed to doing this. So, I wish I had a few more details, but right now we are reaching out and we're trying to learn as much as we can.
So maybe to extend that a little bit, one of the approaches we've taken with NSGIC's strategic planning effort among the board is to reach out to what Molly has referred to as unusual suspects, those organizations outside of NSGIC's typical sphere, to gather information about what we are thinking about strategic planning. So we could extend that kind of effort to reach out to organizations that are smarter and more informed than we are about these equity issues. And rather than issue statements, as Lisa said, learn first, learn first and speak later.
Well put, Tim. Thank you. And, addressing this same question about what external organizations, if any, are you working with to learn more about the needs of underserved? So for us, our first stop is the Digital Coast Partnership organizations. It's y'all, it's Lisa, it's Tim, it's Leland, it's everybody within these organizations that we want to have conversations, with the memberships and the groups, right? Then that you extension are working with it. Maybe some of those unusual suspects, as you said. I like that, Tim. I like that, Molly. And figure out kind of through those networks. That's kind of one way. And then we also have established relationships with the Bureau of Indian Affairs and others, and we've begun those conversations as well. So yeah, appreciate you guys answering that. And I guess the last question we had for the panelists and Lisa, I think you kind of already shared some of this, but if you could reiterate how does your organization define the underserved?
Yeah, well, I mentioned earlier, we're going through a very structured definition process for lots of different words. And some of that comes from, just general discussions that are really making sure we define the niche, the space within this larger conversation nationwide that the ushering research reserves fit. So for us, underrepresented or underserved probably really comes back to the idea of any stakeholder group that's not currently represented in our leadership, which is a pretty long list right now, honestly. And so we see that there's a lot more work we can do out there to make sure we really are touching everyone who views the coast as an important place for them to live or work or recreate. Or so it definitely is not our usual suspects, as I love that. I think I'm borrowing that permanently.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's going to be in the conversation for me as well. You'll be hearing that from me, Lisa. And so I guess Tim and Leland, around that, I'm sure you haven't defined underserved yet. So I don't know if you want to address this question or not, or just let me know. Say pass for now. Sure, it's fine.
Yes. Actually, we've got a start anyway.
Cool. Okay.
And as our executive director put it together for us, as you all probably can guess, we've had hours and hours and hours of discussion about this, trying to refine what we're trying to do and say. So Molly put it down as plainly those individuals and communities who have been historically and currently ignored, unprovided for, uncounted, or biased against. And we're trying to keep it at that.
Thank you for sharing. And yeah, there's a lot of conversation that goes around for these. And I know that's exactly what Lisa was saying with NERA. It's just, a lot of discussion because you want to get it right. And so as far as for NOAA, we're using the president's executive order definition. So underserved community refers to populations sharing a particular characteristic, as well as geographic communities that have been systematically denied a full opportunity to participate in aspects of economic, social, and civil life. So that's how we are defining that. And so I think we have some time, and we had a couple, I think we have one or two questions in the chat. I was trying to follow along. There's some chatter in the chat. Susan, I believe, put a question in here about contractors, and let me read it. Wait, where are you? Thank you, Susan, for providing that. And hi, haven't seen you in forever. All right, so have the panel considered bringing on an expert on this topic to advise? So I really appreciate that question, Susan. And part of the budget initiative that I mentioned from the OCM is to do exactly that. It's to hire those expertise that will help us. So depending on what comes out in the FY22 budget, that's exactly what we are looking toward. And I guess, Lisa, if NERA has an answer, if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I have a really cool example of a way we're trying to to bring in expertise that we don't currently have ourselves. And we're partnering with an author, and I'll put his name in the chat, J. Drew Lannon, who is going to be working directly with the reserve system to help document the intersection between culture and conservation. And he's already been well published on that topic. But we've decided, and he has agreed, more importantly, to work with us in terms of really highlighting the reserve and our reserve sites as places where many underrepresented groups are already using reserve locations as places to recreate or as food gathering locations, as primary food sources. And so him really working to document that with us is a way we feel like we're bringing an expert in to help us frame and understand the conversation better. And I'll write his information in the chat.
Yeah, I was going to email you and ask you, but that'd be great if you could do that. Oh, I think either I'm frozen or y'all are frozen. I'm going to continue and pretend I'm not frozen. Okay, so I guess I'll pass it over to Tim and Leland if you can hear me. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Susan. Yep, no problem.
Oh, okay. All right. I knew I was frozen for a second, but my screen of everybody is frozen. But I appreciate you sharing that information in the chat, Lisa. And then I wanted to pass it over to Tim and Leland if you had thoughts around the hiring a consultant.
So there are obviously a couple of options there. Once the board kind of gets its overall direction for these issues, then look at potentially hiring a staff person to, in some fashion, to be part of the NSGIC team, or hire a consultant on a temporary basis to help us work through a direction and help implement that. So probably two different options there.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. And I hate that y'all are frozen. Leland, did you just take the mic and I don't know it?
Again?
I didn't know if you were about to say something because I can't see you.
No, we're good to go. We're good to go.
Okay. Okay, thanks. And so I appreciate Natalie from Georgia put in some papers in the chat that are something that would be valuable to read. And then Kim also offered that they have some diverse groups of interns and mentees. You're bringing them together, okay, in an effort to bring geospatial education to underserved. And I don't know if Kim, if you want to say anything about that, if you want to come off mute.
I missed that.
Hey, can you hear me?
I missed that
Yep,
question.
can hear you. Oh, maybe elaborate because he missed the question, Kim, or the statement.
Sure. Actually, I was going to talk to the folks who are going to be coordinating the New Orleans meeting in 2023 and maybe see if we can drive the GeoBus over to New Orleans and kind of talk a little bit about geospatial education in the K through 12 realm. This is an incredibly talented, gifted professional group. And I just think we have so much to offer and share with our K through 12 kids, because I know a lot of our interns and graduate students come to geography after declaring a different degree when they start school, and they have their GIS class and they get really jazzed about it, right? And maybe that's some of us too. And then they switch over to geospatial related statistics or education. And it's really a neat opportunity to look at that K through 12 group, and especially when we walk around our local user groups, and I'm just speaking for Florida, and it's very much a monoculture. And I think it would be a really exciting way to maybe get the ball rolling a little earlier. And the University of Central Florida, Tim Hawthorne, he's a National Geographic Fellow, and he's working on actually driving this bus to underserved communities. And they have a day where they do drone activities, mapping activities, and talk about all things geospatial to get the kids, thinking in that way, way before they have to switch majors in college. So that just might be another way that we could help diversify our community a little bit, maybe earlier on. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Kim. And you have the entire audience of NSGIC hearing that, so they can help make that come to fruition. And I appreciate everybody's participation. And I wanted to actually reiterate something that Jamie put in the chat. Happy Estuaries Week. I don't know if everybody knows that's what this week is, but it's National Estuaries Week. So make sure to enjoy and go to your local National Estuary Research Reserve and enjoy, or just go out and enjoy nature. So, and it says, I think Phil Worrell actually shared, we have a minute similar to recent COVID-19 dashboards, NSGIC members helping map specific JEDI issues of role. That's a good question, Phil. I don't know, Tim and Leland, if you want to address that. If you see that in the chat.
Phil, I think that's absolutely one of the things we thought. We have felt that this group is extremely talented in our ability to take our technologies and educate whoever we need to educate. And I think that actually can be a spectacular route to take. So a very good idea. Thank you.
And
so maybe back to Kim's comment too. I would really be in favor of seeing that happen in 2023. Before then, if we can make it happen where we're going next, it's important to get the geospatial bug when you're early, when you're young. So the more we can facilitate that, I think the better for everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. So a second to your idea, Kim. And then Jamie is sharing that she sat on a 9-minute training. So Jamie could probably share the information with you guys about who that was. And yeah, they, as Mickey put in there is a very popular tool. If you haven't checked out EPA EJ Screen, look at that tool. That's a very popular tool right now as well. Appreciate you putting that in there, Mickey. Yeah, move at the speed of trust. That's another one. So I love the unusual suspects and move at the speed of trust. And that's something that we teach in our risk communication training. It's all about the trust that you can make with people when you're having conversations around these things. And I feel like we have a few minutes if anybody has anything else, or we could end early. I'm sure that would not upset anyone, but I just wanted to mention we've kind of gone through what we had as officially in the agenda, and it touched on some fabulous comments. I really appreciate you guys providing in the chat. And I don't know if anybody's, rushing up to hand Leland and Tim any questions or thoughts to put in the chat or to mention on microphone, because I can't see you guys right now. If you have anything else.
Hey, Sandra, this is Kim. I'm just going to really quick mention that I told a lot of people that we were involved with the NSGIC Coastal Caucus and working with you and your team, and how profoundly nice it was to be asked. Just to be asked and be included, have a platform to give some feedback. And I told my management chain, I told my staff at staff meetings, I've told loads and loads of people how impressed and happy we were with initiative and how well it was handled. And thank you for asking, and thank you for making that effort, because it takes time and it takes organization and everything, and just we genuinely appreciate you asking.
Thank you so much, Kim. Really appreciate that. And something that I wanted to offer back to the panel, kind of relates to what you said, is offering this back to final thoughts. So even more information from you guys. If there's a final thought from this conversation that anybody on the panel would like to share as we wrap up.
This is Leland. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. It's nice to hear what other folks are doing. I just wanted to encourage everybody involved here to consider this. I think our industry can provide great leadership on this. Not only can we provide opportunities for people to have meaningful jobs, which very often I hear is what people want. They don't want just to have a job. They want to have a purpose. And this is an opportunity to make sure people can do that. But think about our industry. We are used to looking beyond ourselves. We are used to looking outside our own missions, our own place, and we can show leadership just by being who we are. And if we can educate ourselves and move forward, I think we can do a lot of good. So thank you for this panel. Let's keep the discussion going, please.
I would just ask all the NSGIC state representatives to be thinking about examples that you can share within your states to the rest of us, so we can get a clear picture of what's going on within your states, and just push that along, whether it's coming from your governor's office, from your legislature, or just from your individual work locally there.
And Susan, I think I would just add that I really appreciate the leadership NOAA has on this issue, and the partnership approach they've taken with NERA on it. And for the co-chairs of our group that's been leading these efforts on behalf of NERA and the NERA system, you know, they wanted me to channel that you're not doing this work right unless you really get uncomfortable when you're doing it. And then you really know you're in a place where you're growing and you're learning. And this work isn't easy and it doesn't happen fast, but when you're uncomfortable, you know you're starting to make progress. So I guess here's to all getting uncomfortable and learning together, and hoping it's better in the long run.
Yes, I really appreciate that, Lisa. It looks like Natalie seconded that as well. Yeah, getting uncomfortable, and that really is, you know, that you're digging in deep, and considering these different topics and these different things. I really appreciate that. And I would just like to thank all of you for your participation today. Really appreciate this. I feel like it's been a really great session. Really just wanted to crack that nut and just talk about where we are with equity in our organizations, and just have this conversation. So I feel like it went really well. And I appreciate that some of you thought so as well, as I see in the chat. So it's exciting. So maybe we can have a round two or have something else at the next Coastal Caucus, because we hope to see you all in person in Milwaukee. Fingers crossed. Really hope to be there in person to see y'all. So if you have any following questions, follow-up questions, or any comments that you want to send to Jamie or to me, we'll be sure to address them. Thanks, everybody. We're going to sign off and send you to your break.
Thanks, Susan. It was fantastic, and I think a really, really important thing for us to be talking about. So I applaud all of you for taking the time and the courage to come and talk to us about this. So let's keep the conversation going.